Hey everyone, welcome to the season 7 of the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast.
In this series, we will dive deep into global inequalities and help you understand the world's troubles.
In this episode, we will talk about the Russia and Ukraine conflict going on right now. You will hear about the history, insights from a professor, and discussions of the war. Hi, I'm Ella Forte, and today we'll be talking about the Russia and Ukraine conflict that is going on as we speak. First, I would like to introduce my co-hosts, Sabine Flynn, Brooke Minter, and Colin Fusco, who will help me talk about this topic. Hi.
Hey. Hi, we're really excited to talk about this conflict, and our goal is to get a lot of background and information in this podcast.
All right, well, let's jump into the history of the conflict that started about 12 years ago in 2014.
Yes, I think it's really important because the actual fighting started in 2022. So what really happened almost a decade before?
Let's get into it.
Welcome back. We are now coming with Sabine and Colin to discuss with the history.
In 2013, Ukrainians president backed out of a deal and moved closer to Russia, and this caused a lot of Ukrainians to be really upset, and after that, multiple protests broke out, including the Euromaidan protests, and this caused the Ukrainian president to actually flee the country, which also caused a lot of problems.
This then resulted in Ukraine to form a new, more pro-government. Russia said the new Ukrainian government was illegitimate and worried Ukraine would move closer to NATO.
Also, something that happened in March of 2014, this is when Russian troops moved into Crimea, which is a region in Ukraine with a lot of Russian speakers, and is a major Russian naval base. And also, I feel like that was the first time when it actually broke out between Russia and Ukraine, and when they started having a lot of problems, and then it still happens to this day.
Yeah, and I think that we'll see a lot of this information come back into play. But now we're gonna hop right into our interview with a college professor from Georgia Tech, and his name is Nikolai Kokosov. So, Brooke, what should we get to know about him, and kind of what are we gonna hear?
Okay, well, to get to know about him, he actually specializes in many different things, but some examples are modern European intellectual history, modern France, and also post-Soviet Russia. So he's actually published 6 books, and they've been the works have been published in different languages. So we are going to learn his insights on the war and kind of get to know a little more about what he knows about the war. So let's get into it.
All right, I'm excited. So we're gonna take you there now. Let's go.
So a question that we have on the Ukraine-Russia conflict topic is, what happened before the actual fight in 2022 with the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Yeah, I'm a little uneasy with this formula conflict. It's a war. There was a series of conflicts, or if you want, kind of cultural war, memory war, whatever before. But starting from 2014, and especially from 2022, it's just a war, a large-scale war, the largest war in Europe since the end of the Second World War. Well, of course, war is also a form of conflict, but it's a very special form of conflict, right? Now, how did it happen? How did it come into being? Russia and Ukraine are very closely linked countries. The first kind of proto-Russian, proto-Ukrainian state, which emerged with the center in Kiev, actually, the current Ukrainian capital, was the birthplace of both nations, the Russian nation and the Ukrainian nation. And then throughout the entire history, there were plenty of interconnections, a very complex history when Russia was the first to really organize itself as an independent state, while Ukraine, it took much longer for Ukraine to become an independent state. And the tensions between the Russian, well, imperialism is too strong a word, but kind of Russian expansionist tendencies towards Ukraine and Ukrainian struggle for independence, those tensions are century-long. Now, for the first time, Ukraine, in more or less within the frontiers, which are more or less similar to its frontiers now, or at least before the war of 2022, Ukraine, for the first time, emerged as an independent state in 1918. when the Romanov Empire in Russia collapsed. But it didn't last for a long time because very soon the power in Ukraine was just taken by the communists, by the Bolsheviks. And they emerged a close alliance between Russia with the center in Moscow and Ukraine and several other former parts of the Romanov, the Russian Empire. In the the Russian Empire was reconstructed in a different form. And it's understandable the tensions between the imperial center and, well, colony, once again, is not an exact word, but some kind of dominated parts of the empire. Those conflicts are everywhere, and the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is of exactly the same kind of origin.
So, do you now that we're in this war and everything, do you see a way of it ending? Or do you know?
No, unless, we don't know much about what's really happening behind the closed doors. Now, when there are all the time talks between just American, Ukrainian, Russian delegations, it may theoretically not exclude that it will bring about a kind of compromise. I cannot really imagine what kind of compromise it can be. I don't think that Putin is at all interested in ending the war. I think he enjoys war. Being at war and pretending to be a kind of new Stalin, the winner of the Second World War, according to him. And also, there is always potential for kind of democratic, if you want, reforms. And in Russia too, it's for now the population is largely culturally, politically, psychologically, in many ways under the regime's control. It doesn't mean that things cannot change very rapidly. They can. And if you ask me why Putin and his team have created such an autocratic regime, when at every moment independent experts had just impression it's too much. They didn't have to react as harshly as they do. But they did, and more strongly. Why? Because there is a nightmare they lived through once. They all saw in the age of 30 or something as KGB officers, secret police officers, or some kind of similar things. They all saw how an empire, Soviet empire, collapsed. They know it took 5 to 6 years for a great empire to collapse. A few years before the collapse of the Soviet empire, the CIA presented a report to the Congress saying that we don't see any reason for an economic collapse of the Soviet Union in the foreseeable future. In 7 years, there was no Soviet Union any longer, right? So they lived through this experience. They're terribly afraid of a minor anti-governmental movement developing into a bigger thing, which is why they have created such an aggressively anti-Western regime. And war, as soon as you begin a war, how to demilitarize the country, how to return it to normal, peaceful way of life. They're afraid of that because they risk to, once again, trigger some kind of uncontrollable processes which potentially can result in democratization of the country. That's it.
Hey everyone, welcome back after our interview. So now we're going to get some insights and takeaways that Ella is going to be talking about from the interview.
So actually one of the questions that we were able to ask him is what kind of happened before the actual fighting in 2022. And he was able to tell us that as of right now, this is the largest war that's ever occurred between two European countries. And back in 2014, Russia had more independence before Ukraine ever did have independence. And Ukraine kind of struggled for that independence due to power being taken by communists. And as we know, Russia's had a lot of dictators in the past and presidents that have been over the years. So yeah, that's what I kind of took away from the interview.
That's really interesting. Brooke, do you have any other questions that our interview talked about?
Well, another question we asked him is, does he think the war is going to end? And he does not think the war is going to end. He thinks that Putin likes war and likes the thought of winning. And he also thinks that just like Putin would not want to end the war.
And I think that kind of goes back to Ukraine struggling from independence and Russia kind of always having that power. So what's kind of going to happen really when you have someone, both sides, who don't want to end?
Colin, do you have a take on if you think the war's going to end?
Yeah, based off of what Nikolai has said, I don't really think there's going to be an end to it either because both countries are just so independent and the war has already been going on for so many years. Sabine, what do you think?
I also think they just want two different things and they're just not going to like stop with the constant like fighting. And just like both countries want to like have the power, which it's not working. So that's our take on it.
Which you start to kind of think of other countries being brought in as we've seen over the past few months. What's kind of going to start happening is this going to evolve to something that's bigger and greater? Or is this going to stay kind of as a war just between these two?
Yeah, like is it going to die down or is it maybe going to go back up again from like 2022?
Yeah, we saw that like also like America was helping out with Ukraine and they were like giving food and just helping out. So I wonder if it's also just like gonna go back up and the war is gonna get more like crazy again and then more countries are gonna get like fed into it too.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Getting to Good Troll podcast. Sabine, before we close out, what were your overall takeaways?
So one of the things that I really enjoyed from the podcast that we have done is definitely the interview. It was really cool to listen to someone's like their perspective, especially because he does it as a job, and to hear like his perspective on why he thinks this is happening and if it's going to end or not.
Ella, what about you?
I think overall it was really cool to kind of see about how the information from the past is kind of leading into the present and kind of hearing everybody's insights about what we're all hearing. So we'd love to hear what y'all are thinking, kind of start thinking about that, about how you think this war will end, and kind of digging deep into what your insights are and how can we take something that happened over here and bring it into a bigger and more new idea.
Yeah, well, I hope y'all got some good insights on this podcast, and we'll see y'all later.
Bye!